After working at the restaurant chain for almost 5 years, I was transferred to a smaller and more isolated location. It felt like a fresh start, but it turned out to be a mistake. At first glance, there was nothing special about this place. The decor and layout were standard. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. One evening, while sitting in the dimly lit lobby, I chatted with some members of the night crew. The conversation was easy and casual, and I started to think I might enjoy working here. However, my pleasant thoughts were interrupted when Sam, one of the team leads, handed me a sheet of paper with a serious look on his face. "Read this," he said in a quiet voice. "You're gonna need it tonight." I took the paper with a smile, assuming it was just a routine list of procedures. But as I opened it, my eyes fell upon bold and intimidating letters. Rules of the night shift. I chuckled and brushed it off. Rules, I thought. I'm the manager. I know all the rules. Just as I was about to crumple up the paper, Sam's calm yet stern voice stopped me. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said from behind me. I turned to see his serious expression. "I gave you that list for a reason. You need to read and follow every word of it," he said before disappearing into the kitchen. Curiosity and unease crept over me as I unfolded the paper and began reading. Rules of the night shift. Rule 1. The lobby closes at 11 p.m. If you see someone in the lobby after that, don't speak to them. Just go to the kitchen, grab a burger, and place it on the counter in front of them without making eye contact. Then walk away. It will leave on its own. If you break this rule, go directly to the office, lock the door, and stay there until midnight. Ignore any noises you hear. Rule 2. Between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m., a man may appear at the drive-thru window. You won't hear the usual headset beep, so pay attention. Open page 2 on the register, tell him he's all set, and move him along without making eye contact. If you do make eye contact, close the window immediately and go to the office for 1 minute. He'll be gone when you return. Rule 3. If an employee leaves to take out the trash and comes back through a different door, pick up a knife from the kitchen and stab them. That's not really them. If you break this rule, the consequences are on you, not the redacted restaurant group. Rule 4. If you receive a call between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., answer and ask who's calling. If they say Chris, you're safe to continue the conversation. If they say anything else, hang up immediately, hide under your desk for exactly 30 seconds, and then proceed with your shift. Rule 5. If you enter the office and find that the restaurant has changed when you come back out, go back inside the office, wait 30 seconds, and then exit again. Breaking this rule means you may never be seen again. Rule 6. If the meat freezer makes a tapping sound, don't open it. In case you do, open stand still and do not move. Wait till it goes back in. I read the list over twice, smirking at what I assumed was a twisted hazing prank. "Nice try, guys," I said, laughing. "Scaring the new manager on his first night, huh?" But my laughter was abruptly cut off by a low, gravelly voice. "What's so funny?" A tall, imposing figure stood at the counter, his face half hidden in shadow and covered in scars. I checked my watch, 11:10 p.m. The smile on my face faded as I remembered Rule 1. My heart pounded with nervousness, but I knew I had to play along. Slowly, I made my way to the kitchen and grabbed a burger before returning to the man. Without making eye contact, I placed the burger in front of him. He nodded in acknowledgement and disappeared into the darkness outside. I took a deep breath, convincing myself that it was all just a test. But deep down, I knew there was more to come. As the clock struck 12:55 a.m., I noticed that the trash still hadn't been taken out. I called over to Leah, a member of the night crew who was near the drive-thru window. "Hey, Leah," I said nervously, "could you please take out the trash?" She nodded and quickly grabbed the bags before heading out the back door. I tried to focus on my work again, but my attention was soon diverted when the phone rang at exactly 1:05 a.m. According to Rule 4, I knew I had to answer. But, just as my hand hovered over the receiver, I saw Leah enter through the front door. Rule 3. A chill ran down my spine as I realized something was off about her appearance. Before I could react, she lunged at me with an otherworldly strength. Panic set in, and I reached for the nearest weapon, a kitchen knife. With trembling hands, I plunged it into her chest and watched as she fell lifeless to the ground. Horrified by my own actions, I stumbled back and suddenly remembered the phone call. Racing to the office, I managed to pick up the phone just as it went silent. A deafening static filled my ears, causing blood to trickle out. I dropped the phone and collapsed under my desk in a desperate attempt to escape the noise, but it was too late. Heavy footsteps echoed through the restaurant, and a massive figure emerged in the doorway, towering over me with glowing eyes filled with malice. Frozen with fear, I watched as it let out an ear-piercing roar before bringing its fist down on the desk above me, sending wood splinters raining down on my body. Darkness consumed me. When I woke up, everything felt strange and sterile. I was lying on the floor of the office, and a man with a bald head and piercing eyes stood over me. "Well," he said with a smirk, "looks like you met our little friend." "Not little," I managed to choke out, struggling to sit up. He chuckled and handed me an envelope filled with crisp $100 bills. "Consider this your bonus for a job well done," he said cryptically. "If you keep following the rules, there's more where that came from." What was that thing?" I stammered. But he only held up a finger in warning before turning and disappearing out the door. A year has passed since then, and I still follow those rules every night. I've seen things that defy explanation and that I'll never speak of. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that there are more rules they haven't told me about. Rules that I'll have to discover on my own.
This is probably the creepiest, most unexplainable thing I've ever experienced. Back when I worked as an overnight security guard at the local port, I was one of 3 guards assigned to cover the site, which had a radius of almost 2 miles. During the day, the place bustled with activity. But at night, it was empty, except for us guards and sometimes a safety official. Our main post was the front gate, since there wasn't much need to patrol the rest of the site after hours. Still, the veteran guards warned me the port was haunted, with rumors of strange things happening there ever since a few workers had died in freak accidents years ago. I'll admit, I believed in angels and demons since I was raised religious. But I thought the older guards were just messing with us new guys for weeks. I didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary, just a few odd creaks and maybe a misplaced object or two during my rounds. Nothing to write home about. The port itself was big and had plenty of facilities, including a gym that was installed for workers who sometimes stayed overnight during big projects. This gym was old, with weights, a sauna, and a racquetball court. If you're unfamiliar, a racquetball court is like a big plaster box with glass doors. On most nights, me and Mike, one of the other guards, would stop by the gym to play a quick game of racquetball before heading back to the front gate. One night, around 2:30 a.m., we decided to go all out and hit a full workout instead of playing racquetball. The place was silent. You could hear the electricity running through the lights, and everything else air conditioning. Other equipment was completely off. We were about 15 minutes into the workout when we heard a loud thump from the other side of the gym. We brushed it off at first, assuming it was nothing, and kept lifting. Then it happened again. Another loud thump, this time closer. We thought it might be the lieutenant checking in, so we radioed him. He responded right away, saying he was still at the front gate, now a little freaked. We tried to think logically about what could be causing the noise. It was coming from the racquetball court on the other side of the gym. We wondered if it might be the air conditioning. But then, we remembered the whole system was off, and even when it ran during the day, it didn't make sounds like this. The thumps became more frequent, echoing one after another, louder and more deliberate. We were starting to get seriously creeped out. With flashlights in hand, we walked toward the glass door to the racquetball court, our hearts pounding as we shined our flashlights toward the clear glass. A chill ran down my spine. Inside the racquetball court, we saw one of the balls rolling slowly across the floor by itself. There was no one else in the room. It dawned on us that the thumps we'd heard were the balls slamming against the wall, as if someone or something had been playing in there. Frozen with fear, I felt tears welling up in my eyes, the kind of terrified reaction you can't control. The sight of that ball moving on its own was so disturbing that we barely processed it. The realization hit us at once whatever was in that room wasn't human. Panicked, we turned and bolted out of the gym, screaming as we sprinted back to the front gate. Our lieutenant saw us running toward him, our faces pale and wet with tears. He asked what happened, and we blurted out everything we'd just seen. His face grew grim. "That's why so many guards quit after working here for a while," he said. "There's something evil in this area. This isn't the first time something like this has happened." Then, he showed us security footage from inside the offices. Shadows and dark figures were clearly moving through the rooms, crossing in and out of walls. The lights flickered mysteriously, and some areas seemed to darken in unnatural waves. The sight of those figures only confirmed our worst fears, that there was something more than just shadows at play in this place. I didn't last long at that job after that. I still get chills every time I retell this story, and I'm feeling them again now, just typing it out. To this day, I don't know if it was a demonic presence, a spirit of someone who had died at the port, or something else entirely, but whatever it was real, and it was waiting for someone.
The town of Gildan has only about 400 people, which is pretty small by Massachusetts standards, which is where I am initially from. I decided a country life was more my speed when I got fed up with smog and traffic, packed up my things and headed west. I wound up in Montana, in the middle of nowhere, of course. I just had to find Boston's polar opposite. Anyways, Giltan is one of those rare places with just about everyone serving a purpose in the town's own little ecosystem, and a real lack of need for outsiders. It was by a stroke of luck that I found myself able to stay in such a town. I was driving through and had just checked into the one motel for the night. I crossed the street to the little diner serving all-day breakfast and had ordered my omelet when I overheard two men at the counter talking. Yeah, I don't know what got into him, but he stood up and told me he was done, said he was tired, and his brother out in California had invited him to stay, and that he was going. So, who's gonna replace him, Sheriff? You know, the boy we're fixing to have take his spot is too young still. It was as if fate had slapped me right in the face, and God was holding a big flashing sign saying, "Here is your chance to find a new home." Pardon my interruption, but I happened to hear you needed someone for a job. This may seem a bit rash, but I happen to be in the market, I said, stepping towards them. We got to talking, and despite a few city slicker jokes and questions as to why I wanted to stay in Hilhana, they offered me the role of animal control officer. I had some years' experience volunteering at the Humane Society back home, and honestly, I don't think they would have cared if I'd never seen a deer in my life. I got the impression that everyone had a role, and keeping people in those roles is how the town survived. I was allowed to stay in the motel long-term for a discounted rate and even given 2 adjoining rooms so as to feel more at home. I reported to the sheriff the following Monday, ready to begin my wildly impulsive career as a stray dog finder and feral cat catcher. The first few weeks went smoothly, despite a few rabies scares and a litter of kittens no one could care for. Overall, it was about what I expected, but the pay was surprisingly decent, and each night I got to see more stars than I knew existed. My least favorite part of the job was the roadkill removal. Being in such a rural area, it was not uncommon to get calls about deer that had dotted across the street or squirrels with their guts strewn about. I'd sigh, grab my shovel, and head out to wherever the caller had said they'd hit an unexpected speed bump. My instructions were to just throw the bodies into the nearest woods and let the other animals take care of it, and I did as such without so much as a second thought. Life was simple, and I was getting into the routine until the day everything turned upside down. It was about 6:30 a.m. last Wednesday when I was driving to the town hall where my broom closet of an office was. I noticed something on the side of the road and pulled over, figuring I would be called out to remove it soon enough anyways. As I got out of my truck, I realized it was a pretty large deer, a buck in fact, with pretty big antlers. This was something you wouldn't want to hit. It'd be a crash that would probably render your car unusable. However, there was no car in sight, not even a fender or some broken glass as there usually was with even the smaller does. I approached carefully, just in case some hunter was eyeing me, making sure I didn't take his kill. That would be a whole other situation, having to deal with someone firing too close to the road, and I was not in the mood for that. I wouldn't have to worry about any hunters though, as when I got to the deer, I saw why it was dead. A gaping wound covered where its chest should be. Dried blood pooled around the lifeless body. Sitting in the middle of that puddle was the deer's heart, laying flat on the pavement. Its eyes had been carefully placed in its nostrils, facing opposite directions as if trying to imitate a funny face. I turned on my heels and vomited. This was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I could deal with a smashed-up body, but this was so painstakingly and methodically done that I knew I was dealing with some sick fucker. I called the sheriff, and he came down despite the fact that I had woken him on his day off. His car pulled up not 10 minutes later. He must have been in a hurry. He took one look at the deer and saw his face grow pale. I didn't even bother to ask why, figuring it was because he was just as disgusted as I was. "Son, I've got to go down to the station. Please, just dispose of this as you would normally, and don't tell anyone what you saw. I don't need a fire of panic spreading through my town." If he hadn't been such a good man, I probably wouldn't have listened. I grabbed my wagon I kept in the back of my truck for such things, and was hoisting the deer into it as the sheriff drove off. I was thinking about what could have done this. Probably some sick hunter or kid trying to be funny. A future serial killer, maybe. Who knows? As I wheeled the carcass into the woods off to the side of the road, I was so deep in thought I nearly didn't notice the grizzly's back to me to my left. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and did a double take as I realized what it was. Slowly, I let go of the wheelbarrow and stopped in my tracks, reaching for the bear spray I'd kept on my hip since getting the job. Uncertainly, I let my eyes scan the trees again, trying to see anything that might help me find it. But all I could see was the bear spray I'd kept on my hip since getting the job, and all I heard was, I crept towards it, spray in hand. It wasn't hibernation season, not even close. This thing had to be dead. Sure enough, when I got to the other side, my worst fears were realized. The bear's chest had a massive hole in it, heart laying in front of the body while its eyes poked curiously out of their newfound nostril sockets. Whatever was left in my stomach abandoned me, and I retched until I could barely stand. This wasn't some deranged hunter. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. Once I had some air in my lungs again, I booked it back to the truck and drove as fast as I could to the town hall to find the sheriff. I ran into the building, deciding I had to ask him just what the hell was going on. I knocked on his door and felt my heart sink when there was no answer. I opened it and saw him in his desk, facing the window, his back to me. I took everything in me not to turn and run. I knew what I would find when I got close enough to him. Cautiously, I approached him and grabbed his shoulder, spinning his chair around. His ribs greeted me, and his eyes were staring right at me from their unnatural spots. I stumbled back, choking on a scream. Under his hot, which had been placed on his desk, was an envelope. In the sheriff's handwriting, I saw my name scrawled across the top. I carefully pulled it out from underneath the poor man's most vital organ and opened it to find the piece of paper inside, holding the man's final words. "They don't like newcomers." The words haunted me as I stumbled out of the office. The streets of Guilton were eerily quiet, the rising sun casting long, cold shadows. Who were they? The more I thought about it, the more pieces of Guilton's puzzle began to twist into place. The way the townsfolk avoided eye contact with me, their polite but distant smiles, the cryptic comments about everyone having a role, about outsiders not lasting long. I returned to my truck, my thoughts racing. As I turned the key, the engine sputtered but didn't start. I tried again. Nothing. "Damn it," I hissed, slamming my palms against the wheel. A soft rustle came from behind me. I turned sharply, my breath catching. Standing at the edge of the lot were 3 figures. They were barely visible in the shadows, but their presence was undeniable. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. They didn't respond. I climbed out of the truck, keeping my distance. If this is some kind of prank, it's not funny. One of the figures stepped forward, just enough for me to catch the glint of something sharp in their hand. My blood turned to ice. I ran. The forest swallowed me whole, its dense underbrush tearing at my clothes and skin. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps steady, unhurried. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My lungs burned, and my legs screamed for relief. But I pushed on, until I found myself at the clearing where I had dumped the deer and bear. They were gone. The bloodstains on the ground were the only sign they'd ever been there. Panic clawed at my throat as I spun around, searching for any sign of escape. The forest seemed alive now, watching me, breathing with me. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the shadows. I turned slowly, my body paralyzed with fear. Emerging from the darkness was a creature that defied explanation. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of fur and flesh. Its face stretched into an unnatural semblance of human features. Its eyes, glowing faintly, seemed to pierce straight through me. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I ran again, blindly, until the trees opened up into a dirt road. I don't know how long I ran or where I ended up, but eventually I found myself at the edge of another small town. Not Hilton. Somewhere else. A kind stranger picked me up, took one look at my disheveled state, and brought me to the nearest hospital. When I told the authorities about G. Hilton, they exchanged wary glances. "Son," one of them said, leaning in, "there's no town called Guilton around here. Not anymore." I quit my job as an animal control officer after that. I don't care if anyone believes me. I know what I saw. And I know I'll never forget the sheriff's final warning. They don't like newcomers.